now if we can move on to what the training situation, the scenario for training for support workers, personal care workers, assistants in nursing has been and how it changes. We've got Karen Noble and Lily Mutharaja, both who've working at CIT. Karen's going to be speaking and sharing some PowerPoints with us. I'll just tell you a bit about her. Karen and Lily and I used to work many, many years ago. I was in Canberra and worked as an aged care teacher there. It was a really wonderful time, and I really got my love of Cert 3 level, entry level aged care. I love it. So Karen Noble's a TAFE teacher of 25 years and a program coordinator at Canberra Institute of Technology, CIT, teaching and leading education for aged care, in-home and disability support. Her first career is in local government community services management, which included the first rollout of the Home and Community Care Program, the HAC program, for those who remember it. The second and longest career has been in vocational and carer, so primary carer education. At CIT, Karen has developed and managed the CIT Skills for Carers program for over 20 years. This provides essential training and support to family, i.e. unpaid carers. She leads the team of educators for vocational qualifications in aged care, disability support and community service delivery. She also works with employers to develop and maintain a skilled, qualified and confident workforce. She serves and has served on a number of community sector boards as an advocate for public education through various roles with the Australian Education Union. As a family carer herself, Karen is familiar with issues of mental illness, chronic and complex health conditions, and the demands of family carers to coordinate, advocate, support, and just keep going. She has a graduate diploma of education, a Bachelor of Social Work, a Diploma of Management, and a Certificate in Training Assessment. And Lily and Karen have coordinated together to produce this presentation. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Lynn. That's a big introduction, and thank you to the previous. Thank you to the previous speakers. It's so generous of you to talk to us about your day and that absolute reality check of what it's like working in this sector. So from me, firstly, Yuma, which is the greeting from our Indigenous people here in the ACT. So greetings from the nation's capital. And I'm on the lands of the traditional custodians, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. And I acknowledge their continuing contribution to our communities, to the environment, and to our life here at CIT. That's Canberra Institute of Technology, and we are the TAFE in the ACT. I too want to acknowledge my colleague Lily Mutharaja, who's part of your network, and Lynn Day. Lynn, we worked together many years ago, and as an educator, Lynn's emphasis was to provide supportive learning designed to bring out the best in students, and so that they would be the best support workers we could supply to our sector. At one time, Lynn contributed to our theme for an open day, and the theme she developed was, "It takes time to develop an aged care worker." And Lynn, I have never forgotten your theme. We continue to work with that every day, and I bring it to today's session again, that there are no quick fixes. It takes time to train and support so that we have quality aged care workers. In talking with you today, I'm going to provide some context about vocational education in Australia because it is the starting point for this workforce. And I'm hoping that this just gives you some context and detail that provides foundations for your planning and deliberations and your priority setting for the future so that your organisation can continue to influence this sector that needs a great deal of improvement and development. So we're talking about working in aged care, the entry-level qualifications and pathways. And the things I will talk through some context about vocational education in Australia in 2023, because that's where the training for the aged care workers starts. I'll talk to you about the entry-level qualifications that we are all working with right across the nation, a little bit about pathways and opportunities. But really, opportunities is my sneaky way of saying these are the improvements we need. So I guess they are opportunities. So firstly, vocational education in Australia in 2023. You may be aware that vocational education in this country has not been at its best for at least the last 20 years. And I am confident to say that now reform has commenced. In the last 12 months, we have seen a new structure called Jobs and Skills Australia established to oversee the reform. And they have established 10 Jobs and Skills Councils. Now, I'm not listing the whole 10, but the one that is relevant to this sector is large. It is called Early Educators, Health and Human Services. So it still is a very large portfolio of services for our citizens. Some of the things we hope this council will do is review competency-based training, abbreviated as CBT. I know there are lots of meanings for CBT, but in this context, it's competency-based training to analyse the occupations and the qualification levels. It needs review and reform. We need a review of the funding models, the impacts of the marketisation of vocational education, and especially the practice we have had in recent years of completion funding, which impacts on outcomes. And many of us are lobbying for the return of educational foundations, which over the last 20 years we feel have diminished in our sector as we were very, very driven by checklists and quick acquisition of skills. The other thing that is really large in our sector right now is you will have heard of fee-free TAFE. So in all states of Australia, training for these qualifications has been or is now free, but it's a moving feast. We have just about reached our target for fee-free places in the ACT, and we're waiting to hear if we will get more. So what is the impact? One, it is a statement from our government to say we so much need people to come into this sector, we will reduce the cost barrier. But it does also mean it's very open to people for whom this may not be their best pathway. So for all of us at that front line, there's a lot of gatekeeping. Just because something's free doesn't mean it will be right for you, and we want the best results with that opportunity. So that's unfolding now nationally. Every state, to some extent, the training is free in this sector. So let me move. There we go. So just briefly to explain how training does occur in vocational education, it is competency-based training, arranged in, it's delightful language, training packages. The language mirrored the market system, so they're called training products, training packages. They contain the qualifications, the prescribed levels of performance, the skills, performance, and knowledge that someone is to achieve and be assessed on to obtain the qualification. The competency-based training always includes on-the-job and off-the-job training and assessment, but it's always very interesting. It does not prescribe duration. And I'm sure you've all had examples of people completing a Certificate 3 in aged care in 6 weeks or 6 months or maybe 18 months, depending who you studied with and how they structured their training. It's been very variable, and at times it's also been very damaging for our sector. There is still no prescribed duration. So training for this sector is delivered and assessed by registered training providers or organisations, generally known as RTOs. They are registered with the Australian Skills Quality Authority, known as ASQA, and they must comply with the RTO standards, and that's both the public and private providers in the sector. And just this year, a discussion has started nationally to change the relationship between vocational education and higher education. And I think that discussion will be very relevant to your organisation. So, you know, we have the school sector, we've had vocational education, we have higher education. And from time to time, there has often been a tension, competition, and now we're hoping for a closer alignment and working together of post-school, so vocational and higher education. So that will be an interesting space to watch. So talking about aged care workers, this is known, the language we use is that this is the entry-level job and the entry-level qualification delivered in the vocational education system. Currently, there are various bodies of work about the pay, and we've had that discussion briefly today, the conditions, and it was really nice to hear Chantel's appreciation that people had permanent part-time jobs, because the casualisation of this sector has been problematic, especially as we saw in COVID. So there is work being done on pay conditions, work level and responsibilities, the mobility and the turnover of this workforce. It is still there is still very high movement and mobility, and that makes it very hard to build a quality, sustainable workforce. We also know there are very well documented workforce shortages, not just in the cities, but in regions, rural and remote areas. And that's connected to our national and international workforce shortages. But we also know that is connected to the issues with the shortage of housing, the cost of living, the reputational damage that this sector has carried through COVID, but also through the various reports and Royal Commission, and in my view, the variance in the quality of training that has been provided to this sector over recent years. Now, you may or may not agree with me, but I think they're constant topics of conversation about what has happened and what is happening in our experiences. So, and this may be very familiar, but it might be good just revisiting basics. To get a job in aged care, there continues to be no mandated qualifications in this country. So the governments have relied on organisational policy, and Lynn's data from the beginning indicated that there is a substantial percentage. Lynn, you were saying 60 to 70% of this workforce has the entry-level qualification, but that still leaves a substantial number of people without a qualification. And there's also been enormous variance in the quality of those qualifications. Most employers require a Certificate 3 in individual support. That is the current title of the qualification, or that the applicant has commenced study for that qualification. Of course, you may have different stories from different parts of the country, but it is not mandated. And in times of such workforce shortages, all sorts of things happen about who is working in aged care. The other usual requirements are vaccinations, and it's usually currency with COVID and influenza, the national police check, and whatever your state checks may be. But we are certainly finding employers are wanting their workforce to also meet requirements for the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, because many clients cross over. Many employers in the aged care sector are also supporting clients who come with NDIS packages. So that is adding to those entry requirements, and many employers require first aid. Some RTOs will include first aid as one of their electives in the Certificate 3. We don't. We include another elective that we believe brings more value and specialisation to the qualification, and we recommend students get their first aid certificate because most employers will want it, but we use our elective spaces for something of more specialisation. My next point, I'm saying you need to be available and give some expressed interest in the work. And again, I don't think I'm being unnecessarily cynical. We are often engaging people in this work who might not particularly want to be there. It's just work. And so those screening processes no doubt need improvement, particularly for in-home support, the sort of work that Chantel described, and also for agency work, as Vicky talked about, a reliable vehicle, a driver's license, a communication device, and regular ways of communicating, because that's how you get shifts, that's how you turn up on time. And I raise those things specifically. You might be thinking, yes, everyone's got that. But we are also increasingly recruiting into study and into these jobs people with complex issues of disadvantage. So they have issues of disadvantage both as learners, but also in life. And so the assumption of having a reliable car is not something that many people have. Having a reliable device for communication to get your shift information or to study, they are things you need to get a job, but so many people don't have them. And even yesterday, I was at a session with the Migrant and Refugee Settlement Service, because we are recruiting from those spaces, but people need a lot of other basics before they can study and before they can work. And that is a challenge right across our community right now. So moving into what this qualification is, it is called Certificate 3 in Individual Support. It has been reviewed fairly recently, and so we are all grappling very, very quickly to deliver the newest version. The newest version is about 30% bigger than the old one. It's not necessarily a great thing, but here it is. And we think in that review, there's been an attempt to respond to the various reports and the Royal Commissions. And the danger was to just throw a whole lot more into the entry-level qualification. I will be quite openly critical of that. It hasn't necessarily been done with a great deal of finesse. It's just added. And I would certainly challenge then, what is the appropriate scope of practice for the entry-level worker and what might have belonged in other places. But there it is. And certainly the sector needs a very strict examination of scope of practice and roles and a better alignment to what is in the qualification. So this qualification now has 15 competencies. The previous one had 13. And I have got the link there, but if you want to look at the detail, I didn't put it in today. Training.gov, you can look it up. You can read all the words about what happens in education. There now are 2 streams, an ageing stream or a disability stream, or some RTOs are doing a combination. And the way this workforce is so mobile, many people, I think, will opt to do both streams because most work across disability and aged care. And I think we will see that as an increasing, people will need to increase their opportunities for work. The competency-based training requires competence, which is satisfactory performance in every assessment, both the knowledge and the skills and the practice on the job. So there's no 50 or 60 or 70%. It's satisfactory in everything. The qualification includes a minimum of 120 hours of industry placement if you're not already working in the sector. And of course, many people come to the course who are working, and we work with them and their employer to count those hours. In my recent meeting with TAFEs across the nation, how we're all unravelling the new qualification, the shortest duration full-time is 1 semester, about 20 weeks. We are endeavouring, perhaps is a better word, to do that. Others are offering it over 2 weeks, but more and more students will come into this as part-time students because they also need to work. It's, as we've heard, and for all professions, that clinical placement or the prac teaching for teachers is now becoming very challenging because people also are struggling when they can't afford to lose that income. All of us have now adopted, I believe, blended delivery. So there's a combination of face-to-face, and we do as much in the classroom as we can, but online, independent online. We certainly have mixed up that training mode more since COVID. We reverted to face-to-face as soon as we could because most of the learners at this level are most successful with as much face-to-face as possible. That's been our experience. Obviously, in remote areas, that's not possible, but I believe they would have strengthened their capacity with the online more than we have at the moment. So that's some of that background and context and detail that I hope is useful. Just to
Karen,
consider.
excuse me, Karen, can I
Yes.
interrupt just briefly? We probably have about 5 minutes. Will that work with you? This is really,
Yes.
really interesting.
Only 2 more slides, so whiz through them and then see what time we have at the end.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This slide just lists qualification as potential pathways in the vet sector. So there was a certificate 4 in ageing support, and that qualification has a very uncertain future. A new version was released and it was removed within 2 weeks. It included aspects of team leadership, but right now that is in limbo. So the others that are have potential next steps, there is a certificate 4 in disability support. There's certificate 3 in health services assistance, which is a slightly different direction, but also relevant to aged care. Certificates 3 and 4 in allied health assistance also has a place in aged care. Then, of course, a progression to the diploma of nursing. And we also here talk a lot about the need for training in leadership and management. And that is probably still a very weak point in this career pathway, needs to be boosted. There are some accredited skill sets and leadership and management could be one of the directions to go. And the last thing from me, which is potential opportunities, but things that need to happen. We need to reduce the commencement and completion barriers. And they're those things around disadvantage, the costs of being a student, travel, devices, licenses, and foundation and digital skills. They are still a struggle. We need to strengthen the role of the coach or the mentor for students who are on placement and for new workers. And I think our sector is still fairly weak in that space. My view is that we need to train, support, and pay an allowance to the suitable employees who are prepared to take those roles. We must strengthen that space. We need to promote career pathways, but always value the entry-level job and qualification. We need lots of those people to stay there and be very, very happy working, like Vicky and Chantel talked about. And yes, Vicky, you're going to the Diploma of Nursing, which is great, but we need people in all those spaces. And I want to reaffirm that it takes time to develop a good aged care worker. We need to build the expectation that training for these jobs is not quick and easy, but it needs to be highly valued and highly supported. So Lynn, I'll stop there. I think I'm just on time. And
you're wonderful.
And Lily may have a bit more to add later. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Karen. That's amazing. And I know people are really sending messages of this is really interesting and engaging. Thank you. And thank you to Lily as well.